All right, everyone. China had been taking some degree of steps forward in sort of political philosophy for the last few decades. It had emerged from the throes of like Mao Zedong mode, hardline communism. Oh yeah, we purged 50, 60 million people between execution and famine, waged a few wars, oddly enough, with other communist nations that we once supported, got into a contest with Russia over who would lead communism. Then we started bickering with the U.S., and now we just abuse workers. Like, we don't have literal slavery. We just have basically servitude and misery for a couple 100 million lower class, basically peasant workers within China. But it had been improving over time. Again, from slavery to servitude, okay, it's a half step forward in maybe leaving behind the bad old days where your neighbors all were starving. Just ignore that time they purged all the sparrows. What a great idea that was. Now, though, it looks like their El Presidente Z might become dictator, literal dictator. They're going to scrap the concept of term limits. Now, if you know anything about elections, China style or communist style, communist in name only at this point, but commie style anyway. It's not really an election. It's basically, do you want Xi to be there? Yes or yes. There's not going to be anybody running against him. There's only one party to vote for. It doesn't really matter then at that point. It's not exactly a functioning republic, a functioning democratic vote. Now, that's fine if the person in charge is really good at what they do, if they're benevolent, they're not abusive. You could have, arguably, a libertarian dictatorship in the world. You could actually have that. You'd have a dictator running things. You wouldn't have voting. You wouldn't have a sort of council. You would have one person in charge that simply didn't give a damn, and it would basically function, or even a constitutional dictatorship of sorts, a Pinochet sort of situation. But Xi is not going to inherit such a situation. He's inheriting a country in which, even under its semi-technical democratic system of today, it is heavily censored, extremely high on the degree of wealth inequality between, the top 1/10 of 1%, the party insiders, and then everybody else, including the burgeoning investment class that at any given moment can have everything they own nationalized, which, by the way, it's because of instability in China that Chinese investors buy things up in the U.S. When I see stories about, China bought so many homes and so many businesses, China's going to own us. No, it's more like the investment class there that has marginal wealth and has the ability, knows that China has problems, the U.S. has fewer. They want a slice of the pie here so that if things go sour there, they can come over here and, I'm coming to manage my properties. I'm just not going to leave. Especially under Obama's immigration proposals. He'd be like, yeah, and they have money too, so it's the cherry on top. It's an added bonus. Now, it's not China owning the U.S., it's the other way around. It's the U.S. is stable. They understand that if they invest here, it's a foothold in a place that they can potentially go if everything goes south in China. China can't nationalize a property that's owned, titled under the United States. It can't do that. It can't nationalize something that is physically here within the lower 48, and that doesn't have the capability to actually force the United States to recognize any such claim. But China also, it's already got an intranet, and it's already heavily censored. They decided to go a little bit further, though. They banned search terms in China. See, China does what a lot of people like the CNNs want to do here, which is basically say, well, we're going to give the government and some corporations limitless control over what users post. We should be able to implement what is literally right-think. It is literally out of 1984. This basic strategy that is used on the Chinese internet, to the point where you can disappear entire words and concepts. If you can control the language, you can control the mind. It's very, very simple, because the language is how the mind understands the world, how it describes it to others, and how communication actually takes place. So if you ban people from talking about Xi being similar to Mao, if you block people from talking about dictatorship, or how it's shameless and disgusting and horrible, and then you ban Animal Farm. I wonder why they could possibly want to ban that. It makes it easier to control the population. It makes them more passive. Now, they're already disarmed, too, so, that certainly helps. Here, we don't have that problem, at least. Not yet. But Xi wants to be dictator. When I see that Trump is gearing up for a trade war with China, dude, this could collapse China. Domestic problems over, the loss of what was a marginally representative style of single-party system in favor of a literal dictatorship, that domestically, plus a trade war with the largest economy in the world, with China needing to sell things to the United States, now having to pay a tariff in order to actually bring its goods over here. Some of the goods we used to, by the way, export these things to China. One of the reasons we have a problem is that we don't really, it's lopsided trade. It's not, it's not free trade. It's just China devalues every good. It devalues everything so that it can flood our market with cheap goods. It's what they do. It's not free trade. It's manipulation on their part. Trump is absolutely correct. When all these other countries say, well, the United States is going to make problems and we oppose this, that's because you want those cheap goods. You want your workers, whose wages you've suppressed now for decades, to have those slightly cheaper goods. The problem is, economically speaking, having those cheap goods suppresses jobs, literally U.S. businesses that could pay more so people wouldn't have to buy the cheap goods. You've created a sort of slow spiraling down the toilet situation where the fact that so many cheap goods are on our market in a lack of protection situation is actually sinking our wages. Trump understands money more than any other single topic. It's not foreign policy that's his forte. It's not conducting war. It's not certainly not charisma, although he can be charismatic at times, at least to his fans. But he is very, very good with money. He knows what he's doing, and I think he'll do fine. If he starts a so-called trade war, it's not us. We're not going to be the ones that lose. Somebody else will be more than willing to step in and flood the goods through anyway. It just won't be China. Well, that helps, strategically speaking, bring them to the table. But you know what I think? It's possible he's trying to get them to come to the table and go, haul off and attack North Korea with us or something. It's possible that he intends to do that by saying, hey, I can tariff your goods. You can't sell to us. Your economy goes into steep decline. Bye-bye growth. Bye-bye investment. It will collapse your economy. It could start a civil war in China. Not joking, because so much of their economy relies on we sell cheap shit to the US. If they stop selling that cheap shit, their economy takes what, a 15-20% cut? You realize how much wealth would disappear overnight? How many investors would flee? How many richer Chinese people would say, okay, we're applying for a visa now. We're going to the US. We're going to Canada. Hell, at that point, we're going to Vietnam. It'd be better off. You realize what chaos it would cause? And, when it's combined with Xi, over there being Xi Zedong at that point, yeah, probably does cause a mini revolution or at least a military overthrow. Hell, it could liberalize the country. Then we don't have to worry about this weird-ass tripolar world with a rising China still competing with larger in a nuclear sense, but ultimately much smaller economy, Russia, for supremacy within Asia, which really doesn't help the situation. We could return it to a bipolar world status, where Russia is the main opposition. Russia has its sphere. China is no longer a threat. China would be more of a true neutral party, and they have been at times, diplomatically on North Korea. But he could get them to the table. He could say, well, I can crush your economy within, a year or two. Oh, and we'll take a mild hit too. It'll cause problems in the world, but you'll be the ones that really, really collapse. Or I could not tariff you, but I'm going to need a little bit of a guarantor here with regards to Kim because he's really fucking with our allies in the region. I'm tired of him doing that. I want to be the U.S. president that took care of North Korea, but we're going to need you to at least step aside, if not join in. Go ahead and take these minerals up in the northern part of the country. Let us reunify the rest of the peninsula. Problem solved. We'll bear the brunt of the battle, but, you just sort of go in, keep them busy in the north a little bit, and, we'll call it a day. He could get something like that accomplished. Would China really want to, lose, again, 15-20% of its economy, which is solely comprised of exporting to us? Hey, who else is going to buy it? Nobody else is going to buy those goods. You can flood the world market and put a bunch of other countries under, start a worldwide depression maybe. I don't think that China has the ability at this point with so many other up-and-coming exporters like India within the region alone. India. It's invested in parts of East Africa. They're going to become exporters. China was trying to set itself up for a comfy retirement from being an industrial economy. It wants to transfer, at least those urban coastal regions into a post-industrial sort of Japan-style feel. It wants to modernize. They've begun reforesting because they realize, now that we're a major player in the world, we don't want to be heavily polluted because it's not good. Then we're spending a lot on healthcare anyway, by having that situation. They're like, okay, we're going to plant I think it's an area the size of Texas with trees over the course of the next couple of years. So and that's good, by the way. And nobody, I don't care, I don't dislike the Chinese people. But in terms of trade war, in terms of going up against a human rights violating dictatorship, it's not exactly a friend to us anyway, a little more friendly with Russia. Yeah, go ahead and wage your trade war. And if it gets Z out of power, somebody who's willing to shake hands with Trump, but at the end of the day is turning into a dictator for no reason. Yeah, that'd be a problem. I think we should do something about that. Yeah, I don't think it would be good for our economic health if we don't wage a little bit of a trade war. And anyway, it's not like Xi is going to go moralist on us and say, well, the morally bankrupt U.S. is trying to screw Chinese steel, Chinese aluminum with his tariff trade war. What are you going to do? Talk about us being bad people when you're saying, oh, we're going to scrap elections and censor anyone who disagrees. Yeah, I don't think it works that way. I don't think most people are going to see it your way on that one. Certainly nobody over here. Antifa might. But then again, they just use any excuse to prop up a so-called communist regime they can. By the way, China's not really communist. The ruling communist party, so-called, is just a bunch of corporatist, tie wearers anyway. It's not exactly run by the proletariat, if you know what I'm saying. It doesn't exactly look like maybe it did under Mao. Even it's become more spit-shined and professionalistic, more gold-gilded. It looks a little bit more like Trump than it would really some Cuban revolutionary at that point. But China could very well fall because of this. This combination of a major domestic dispute over, literally even having elections, plus possibly a trade war that could cause large swaths of their economy to dry up. That could cause some real problems. They've also already had their great slowdown begin. They're beginning to slow down in growth anyway. Investors are becoming nervous. This would shock them even more. I think it could cause a recession in China almost immediately if we have a trade war. Xi, though, he shouldn't think that he's invincible. Chinese military is large and in charge, but if you start purging your own population, don't you think at some point other countries aren't going to want to play with you anymore? I think that they will. Hell, they have enough problem with a covert proxy war that kills a few tens of thousands of people, launched by the U.S. By the way, I agree with the summation of that being wrong. What do you think would happen if you purged 10, 20 million people? A small segment of your own population, but still it's bigger than the population of many countries around the world. By the way, I heard that Ireland wanted to take a million immigrants despite having a population of about 4.5 million people. I'm wondering about the wisdom of that, but okay, yeah, have fun. That's about all. Peace out.